The first tremor felt like the world sighing. In the Atacama Desert, where the sky drank the stars and the earth held its breath, the ground split open not with violence, but with reverence. Dr. Eris Thorne knelt in the dust, his gloved fingers brushing against the obsidian monolith that had slumbered for eons. It pulsed beneath his touch, a slow, rhythmic heartbeat that matched his own. The glyphs carved into its surface weren't writing, they were scars. Each line told a story of pain, of loss, of a civilization that had sacrificed everything to seal away the thing that now stirred. Behind him, the ruins of the temple complex stretched into the darkness, silent witnesses to an awakening no human was meant to see. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and decay. From the fissures in the earth, they emerged, silicon-based beings, their bodies crystalline and sharp, their movements deliberate as glaciers. They called themselves the Geodes, and they had come to claim Earth as their new temple world. Their ships, like shards of broken diamond, blotted out the moon. Eris watched, heart pounding, as they dismantled the monolith with tools that hummed with cold, precise energy. They didn't understand. They never would. The Geodes saw a resource, a foundation for their sacred spires. Eris saw a tomb. Commander Kales of the Geodes fleet stood tall, his obsidian armor gleaming under the twin suns of Earth. He had overseen the conquest of 17 worlds, each one a stepping stone to this moment. Earth was different. Here, the planet itself fought back. The wind howled not with air, but with the whispers of the dead. The ground trembled not with seismic activity, but with rage. Kales dismissed it as superstition, the dying gasps of a primitive world. His soldiers marched onward, their crystalline feet crushing the fragile relics of human civilization. They had orders: cleanse the temple, prepare the ground for the great ascension. Nothing would stand in their way. Then came the silence. Not the absence of sound, but a presence so profound it stole the noise from the air. The Geodes froze, their internal sensors screaming of something vast, something ancient. From the deepest chasm, a sound emerged, not a roar, but a hum. A frequency that vibrated in their very cores, a reminder of the geologic prisons they had escaped eons ago. Kales raised his hand, ordering a retreat, but it was too late. The earth split, and from the abyss rose the Old Ones, their forms shifting like smoke and stone, their eyes burning with the fire of dying stars. Eris stumbled backward as the temple walls began to bleed. Not blood, but a thick, viscous liquid that smelled of iron and starlight. The Old Ones were waking, and with them came the memories, the screams of a billion souls trapped in the earth, the weight of an empire built on bones. The Geodes fired their energy weapons, but the beams dissipated into the air like mist. The silicon creatures had underestimated their enemy. The Old Ones weren't just beings. They were the planet itself, a collective consciousness forged in fire and time. Eris knew then what he had to do. The humans couldn't fight this alone. But the Old Ones, they might listen. One of the Old Ones detached from the mass, its form coalescing into something vaguely humanoid, though its limbs were jagged obsidian and its face was a mask of shifting rock. It turned its gaze on Eris, and in that moment, he understood. The Old Ones weren't evil. They were guardians. And the Geodes? They were profane. Eris reached out, not with a weapon, but with his mind. He offered not fear, but empathy. The connection was instantaneous, a flood of images, human cities, laughter, loss, love. The Old Ones hesitated, their ancient minds struggling to comprehend such fleeting emotions. Kales watched in horror as his soldiers fell, not to weapons, but to the earth itself. The ground swallowed them whole, their crystalline bodies dissolving into the stone. The Old Ones weren't killing them, they were erasing them. Unmaking. Kales had never encountered such a force. The Geodes were conquerors, destroyers. They broke worlds, remade them in their image. But this was annihilation. The temple around him groaned, its stones shifting, reshaping, forming walls that pulsed with malevolent energy. Kales activated his comms, but the signal was drowned out by the hum of the Old Ones. They were speaking to the planet, and the planet was answering. Eris stumbled forward, the connection between him and the Old Ones growing stronger. He could feel their pain, their loneliness, their millennia of imprisonment. The Geodes had come to desecrate their prison, to defile their sacred space. And in doing so, they had unleashed something the universe had not seen since the dawn of time. Eris closed his eyes, focusing, pouring his own memories into the link. Childhood summers, the warmth of a loved one's hand, the taste of rain. The old ones recoiled, not in anger, but in wonder. Such fleeting, fragile things. And yet, so full of life. The first human to see the truth was a child. Maya, no older than 10, had wandered into the desert, drawn by the strange lights in the sky. She stood at the edge of the chasm, her small hand outstretched as one of the old ones reached for her. The others screamed, but Maya only smiled. The old one's touch was not a blow, but a caress. Images flooded her mind. Cities of crystal under alien suns, the birth of stars, the slow death of galaxies. She saw the geodes not as invaders, but as refugees, fleeing a dying world. The old ones had sealed themselves away to protect the universe from their own power. Now, the seal was broken. Kayles watched the exchange, his mind reeling. The child was unharmed. Impossible. The old ones were supposed to be mindless destroyers, forces of nature given form. And yet, here they were, gentle, curious. Kayles lowered his weapon, the weight of his orders suddenly feeling like a shackle. The Great Ascension was a lie, a myth told to justify conquest. The geodes were not saviors. They were thieves. And Earth? Earth was a tomb, a prison, and a sanctuary. Eris felt the shift in the old one's consciousness. They were no longer just guardians, they were allies. The bond he had forged was fragile, but it held. The humans had something the geodes lacked, empathy, the ability to see beyond the self, to connect across species. The old ones had been alone for so long, and now they were not. Eris stood, his legs trembling, but his heart steady. The war was not over. It had just begun. The geodes would not surrender easily. They would fight, and in fighting, they would awaken the full fury of the planet. Kayles made his choice. He turned from his fallen soldiers, from the shattered temple, and walked toward the chasm. The old ones parted before him, their forms shimmering like heat haze. Maya stood at the center, her eyes wide, unafraid. Kayles knelt, not in surrender, but in supplication. He offered his people's history, their pain, their fear. The old ones listened, and for the first time in eons, they did not judge. They understood. The universe was vast, and there was room for all, even the broken, the desperate, the conquerors who had forgotten how to dream. The sky darkened, not with night, but with the approach of something far older than stars. The old ones rose from the earth, their forms stretching into the heavens, becoming mountains, becoming storms, becoming the very air the geodes breathed. They did not attack. They enveloped. The geodes' ships, once so proud, now drifted like leaves in a cosmic ocean, their systems failing, their crews awed into silence. Kayles stood beside Maya, his hand resting on her shoulder. The child had become the bridge between worlds, the translator between silicon and stone, carbon and consciousness. Eris watched from the temple steps, the wind whipping his hair. The old ones were not just defending Earth. They were remaking it. The air grew thick with energy, the ground pulsed with life, and the stars themselves seemed to bend around the planet. The geodes had come to conquer, but they had instead become part of something greater, something sacred. The alliance was forged not in blood, but in understanding. In the end, the greatest weapon was not a gun, but a hand offered in friendship. The first rays of dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in hues of gold and violet. The temple stood whole once more, its wounds healed, its purpose renewed. The geodes' ships were gone, not destroyed, but transformed. They hovered in orbit, silent, their crystalline hulls now glowing with the soft light of newborn stars. Kayles was no longer a commander. He was a student, and his teacher was a child. Maya sat with the old ones, her laughter echoing through the canyons, her presence a balm to their ancient souls. Eris walked among the ruins, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The universe was vast, and there were others like the geodes, others who would come, drawn by the power of Earth. But now, they were not alone. The old ones were awake, and they were watching, always watching. The humans had proven themselves worthy, not through strength, but through heart. And in that, They had earned the protection of the most powerful force in the cosmos. The stars above began to shift, patterns rearranging themselves into something new, something beautiful. The old ones were singing now, a melody that vibrated through every atom of the planet, a song of creation, of destruction, of rebirth. The geodes listened, their cold, logical minds finally grasping the poetry of existence. They had come as conquerors, but they left as converts. Kaylee stood at the edge of the chasm, his face turned toward the sky, tears tracing paths down his obsidian cheeks. The universe was not a place of war. It was a place of wonder. Eris joined him, the two of them standing side by side, human and alien, bound by a truth neither had ever expected to find. The temple behind them pulsed with light, a beacon in the darkness, a promise of peace. The old ones had been sealed away for a reason, but now they were free. And with that freedom came responsibility. The guardians of Earth were not just stones and stars. They were hope, and in that hope, the future was written. The desert was quiet now, the wind carrying the faint echo of a song older than time. Maya sat at the entrance to the temple, her eyes closed, her hands resting on the warm stone. The old ones were around her, their forms softening, their edges blurring into the air. They were not leaving. They were staying. Earth was their home now, and the humans? They were their family. Eris approached, his steps silent, his heart full. The war was over. The alliance was sealed. The universe had changed. And it was all because of a child's courage, a commander's humility, and a doctor's faith. The last rays of sunlight faded, and the stars emerged, brighter than ever before. The geodes ships in orbit began to glow, their lights weaving patterns in the sky, a silent tribute to the world they had almost destroyed. Kaylee's watched from the temple steps, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon, not to fight, but to remember. The past was a scar, but the future was a promise. And in the heart of the desert, under the watchful eyes of the old ones, that promise was kept. The alliance was holy. The bond was unbreakable, and the universe would never be the same.